Hello and welcome to Smart Grid Technologies. I'm Adam Reed from the Renewable and Sustainable Energy Institute in Boulder, Colorado, USA. In this final webinar within our exploration of power generation and related technologies, we will cover demand-side technologies that commonly fall under the term smart grid. Though smart grid technologies are not in themselves renewable energy technologies, they have important ramifications for the cost effectiveness and feasibility of renewable energy as a grid-connected energy source. Smart grid efforts aim to both expand electricity system infrastructure so as to better accommodate renewable energy sources, and to marry that infrastructure to an information technology system that sits on top of the physical infrastructure. This allows for orders of magnitude larger quantities of data to pass between consumers, grid operators, and energy suppliers. All this communications capability is thought to eventually allow the grid's many sources, from fossil plants to offshore wind farms to thermal storage to consumer behavior, to autonomously self-organize in an efficient manner. It's important to bear in mind that smart grid technologies are not required for the integration of renewable energy into power grids below large penetration levels, but they can have ancillary benefits to the activity. Smart grid has a wide list of technologies and potential functionalities. This list is neither exhaustive nor definitive, and each grid has its own upgrade priorities owing to system issues, policies, and philosophies. Nevertheless, this is a good indicative listing of technologies and approaches that typically fall under the category of a smart grid. First, an integrated communications architecture that allows instantaneous communication between grid operators, generators, bulk power markets, and consumers. Theoretically, this allows for the communication of price signals to consumers that could affect demand response behaviors to the benefit of the grid. For example, a grid operator might see that wind power output is about to drop and send a price signal to consumers that causes them to restrict consumption so as to avoid the need to bring additional fossil resources online. This sophisticated vision of seamless cross-grid integration has yet to occur, however. Next, sensing and measurement technologies that provide electric utilities with more and better information about the state of the grid on a moment-to-moment basis, and integrate grid operations with weather forecasts and their impacts on both load and renewable generation output. Phasor measurement units allow for instantaneous monitoring of power quality throughout the grid so as to identify grid instabilities in time to fix them, preventing blackouts. Smart meters, or advanced metering infrastructure, is the portal to two-way communication with loads, meaning consumers. These devices allow utilities to see how loads consume power over very short time intervals and to send signals to the load that can be used for demand response. Advanced components include materials science and electrical engineering advances for more efficient transmission of power and operation of components like switches. Advanced control refers to power system automation to diagnose and rapidly fix problems in the grid, also known as a self-healing grid. Decision support refers to visualization software and analytics that allow grid operators to make sense and decisions out of mountains of new information they receive every moment. Finally, dynamic power generation refers to control and ramping capabilities in generation and energy storage assets that allow grid operators to balance generation and load instantaneously and at least cost. Though there are many issues that arise in smart grid implementation, the most catastrophic risk associated with smart grids is the potential for cyber attacks on the power grid. These include criminal attacks aimed to secure data and personal information for theft and other nefarious activities, terrorist attacks meant to cause physical damage and harm, and even attacks by hostile governments to cripple critical infrastructure and cause economic harm. Functionally, the capabilities to exploit smart grid-like networks already exist in forms like the famous Stuxnet virus of 2009. Smart grid technologies have fallen on hard times in many places. While demonstration projects and experiments are still underway, the initially strong momentum behind smart grids has largely dissolved for the moment. This is due to a number of factors, not least of which was the global economic collapse in 2009, which severely restricted capital availability for these kinds of high-risk projects. In addition, smart grid devices met a number of challenges that technology advocates failed to foresee. One of these problems was intense consumer resistance to smart metering, which provides utilities with incredibly granular data about individual behavior. The chart on the right allows the utility to determine which appliances are in use in a single home at any time of day, providing a precise silhouette of the inhabitants' activities. This unnerved many consumers, as did the proposition that they would eventually have to pay for the additional equipment through electricity rate increases. Additionally, the presumption among many smart grid proponents that consumers would readily respond to price signals appears to become more complex, as behavioral studies have shown that many consumers pay essentially no attention to electricity rates, and that even large rate hikes had little impact on consumption behavior. Understanding just what, if anything, would drive consumers to take an active role in managing their consumption is still a major research gap. Utilities themselves often have a hard time justifying smart grid investments. as they must normally find multiple revenue streams out of the technology in order to convince regulators of its value. In addition, many electric utilities still operate under revenue models that reward them for selling more power. Investing in technology that encourages consumers to curtail usage is profoundly non-intuitive to these utilities. Finally, there is the question of just what we're going to do with all that data once we have it. While it's easy to think about all the great things system operators could do with more information, in reality having too much data can be a bigger problem than having too little. System operators are used to seeing data streams from thousands of devices, but smart meters alone introduce the possibility that a system operator may receive data from millions of devices, an order of magnitude more sources of information. What is the operator to make of all this information, plus the entirely new component of weather data and renewable energy output forecasting? It's not entirely clear yet how all of this information will translate into better decision-making, and this is another research and operations development gap. Finally, there is a professional culture challenge inherent to the smart grid, which is that information technology experts generally know very little about power systems, and power systems experts generally know very little about information technology. This domain gap creates big lags in knowledge creation and problem identification, and there is a real need for new professionals that understand the nuances of information as well as energy. Thank you for your attention.